Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the field trip to Liquity tonight. Yeah, I think some other students will join later, probably, but since I see the majority, so we will get started right on time. So we have nursed the macroeconomic theory and how to simulate macro models and discussion about the policies in the past few weeks. However, I think there's nothing more exciting than you see how we can implement macro theory in reality and to create products that meet people's needs. So robots from the company that serves this purpose. So we are very excited tonight to have this cloud field trip like across time zones. So that's super exciting. And also, I have received the questions from all the students. Like we have like thousands of questions, probably not be able to be answered tonight. For the logistics, I will grade your questions in Sakai. But if you are eager to be answered, please also post the questions in our chat box. So Dr. Yulin Liu, who like knows robot and Liquity better than me, he will be picking the best questions and to be asked. Cool. So now let's welcome Dr. Yulin Liu, who is a pre-colleague of robots, to introduce robot in more details.
Thanks, Luo. Good afternoon, Robert. Good evening, everyone. My name is Yulin. I am the guest lecturer for next week. So thanks to each and every one of you for being with us here today. We are very pleased to be able to invite Dr. Robert Lauko to give us a lecture on stablecoin and his own decentralized finance project, Liquity. So let me take this opportunity to briefly introduce Robert. Robert is a former colleague of mine back at Liquity Foundation in Zurich. He's now the founder and CEO of Liquity. And Liquity is an interest-free borrowing and stablecoin protocol built on Ethereum. Robert holds a PhD in law from the University of Zurich. And before turning into a blockchain researcher and joining the Liquity Foundation in 2017, Robert had worked as a law clerk at the Swiss Federal Administrative Court, as legal counsel for Swiss and as a legal counsel for Swiss Telecom Company. He has worked on many different layers of Definity's internet computer, including consensus algorithms and incentive design. And Robert decided to start his own project in the fledgling DeFi space early this year or late last year. So today, it is our pleasure to have Dr. Robert Lauko with us. Robert, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Yulin, and also thank you so much, Professor Luo Zhang. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm so excited to have the chance to present my project and to present the vision of Liquity to all of you. I think this is a great occasion to bring academia and like practice a bit closer together and see where we have like some common grounds to build upon. So I'm happy to share my screen and just start my presentation right away. If I may do so. So yes, it seems to work. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm going to present. So as Yulin just said, Liquity is an interest-free borrowing platform, which is also a stable coin. So we have this kind of dual purpose system where we are lending out our own stable coin to borrowers without charging interest. And the way I would like to structure this presentation is that I would start with a brief introduction to stablecoins in general. And then I would like to highlight the main features of our platform, which make it stand out maybe from the competition, which is the efficient liquidation mechanism we have. And we also have some specific price stability mechanisms. And then I would also like to touch upon our business model, like how we do money and how the project can finance itself. And then last but not least, I will also go into a bit more like in a less formal and theoretical part where I just would like to tell you a bit more how I started this and how the team is working together and where the project stands now. So let me start by giving you a short introduction to stablecoins. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the different concepts, but maybe just very briefly, I assume you all know that traditional cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum, like Ether, they are volatile. So they are not very stable in value. And they are not just a little bit volatile, they are more volatile than traditional assets like the Standard & Poor's index or gold. They are much less volatile than crypto assets, as you see here. Bitcoin and Ethereum is even more volatile. And that's why these asset classes are a bit hard to be used as a means of payment. And that's why many projects and people try to think about building stable coins that are much more stable than these volatile cryptocurrencies. And there have been a few attempts. I mean, there are a few existing stable coins. You can see a few here. There is USDT, like Tether, for example. There is USDC, which is the US equivalent to Tether. There is also TrueUSD and DAI. And I mean, they are stable, but as you can see here, the vertical axis shows that even though they are stable, they are not always that stable. So they should be pegged to the US dollar, but at some occasions they break through the peg, so they can go up to 105, for example. And DAI here is even worse. It got up to almost 110. And that was, I think, this March when we had this crisis due to Corona. Then all the crypto markets went crazy, and the stable coins were also affected. So there are many different stable coins, and I cannot talk about all of them, but I would just like to give you one relatively simple classification of them. There are fiat-backed stable coins, crypto-backed stable coins, and something I would call crypto debt-backed stable coins. I will tell you the difference in a few minutes. There is also a category I would call algorithmic stable coins, but I won't treat them now in this presentation. They are a bit special, and it's not so clear whether they can work even, and they are more theoretical, and some of those stable coins have failed in the past. So I will focus on these three and then show you how Liquity fits into the crypto debt-backed type of stable coin. So you see here like the different projects which are building stable coins. So let me start with the fiat-backed stablecoins. I think this is the most the simplest design. It basically involves an issuer, like some company which runs the project and which like does something which is, I think, called a standing facility in traditional banking, or where a central bank would basically guarantee some conversion rate or guarantee some kind of facility towards the banks. So here it's a bit different. Here we have normal people who wants to own crypto or want to buy stable coins. So what they can do is they can basically send US dollar to the issuer and get a token, which is a stable token pegged to the US dollar at 1-to-1 conversion rate. Most of the time they have to pay some fees, but it's a 1-to-1 conversion normally. And this also works in the opposite direction. So every owner, so everybody who owns like this stable coin, like here it's tethered, I just took this as an example, should have the right to give it back, to redeem it. This is called redemption. So they give it back to the issuer, and the issuer would just give them the same value in US dollars back. So this is all based on a reserve. So whenever the issuer gets some US dollars, the issuer would put it on a bank account. So that's where the issuer keeps basically the reserve to back the stable coins. So that's why it's fiat backed. It's not backed by tokens, but backed by traditional money. And here we see that the reserve currency is also the same as the peg currency. So that means we have a reserve in US dollar, but also the stablecoin is pegged to the US dollar and should follow the value of US dollar. Now, there are a few problems with this design. One of them is that this is not really decentralized. So we have an issuer, which is a company which could fail or which could go bankrupt. We also have a bank in the background, which could also have some default risk. So, and it's just based on legal claims. So, I mean, this mechanism that you can redeem is based on a legal system. It's not really a technical stablecoin. Yes, so that's the issue with those with this fiat-backed stablecoin system. Then one other type of stablecoin is a crypto-backed stablecoin, where we just replace basically the fiat value, the fiat currency, by another cryptocurrency. So here we see there is some kind of coin which is then given to a smart contract instead of a issuer, instead of a company, and you would get whoever basically provides such a token to the smart contract would get back a stable coin, and it would get back it at face value. So that means, let's say this person gives like or provides 100 of this token, and this token has a value of 5 each. So it would mean whenever you or when Alice basically wants to get stable coins, she gives 100 coins of this, so a 500 value to the smart contract, and so she would get back 500 stable tokens in return. So this design has also its intricacies, and or just maybe briefly, it also works the opposite way. So you, as before, we can see that here you can basically give back the stable coin and exchange it at face value for the other token, like which is used as a reserve. So here we see that there is another complexity. Here the reserve currency is not equal to the peg currency. So the reserve is now this whatever token. This could be any token basically. It could be Ether or Bitcoin or like anything. But the token itself should be pegged to the US dollar or maybe to yuan or to euro or Swiss francs. So it's not the same. And which leads to a problem, because now when the system needs to just hold these tokens in a reserve, and it now can happen that the token drops in value, and at some point the reserve wouldn't be enough or sufficient to serve all the redeemers. So everybody who wants to get the C tokens back at face value, that might not work anymore because the reserve has just lost too much value. There are still a few attempts or systems that can, like basically they solve this problem in different ways. So Terra is interesting. I would suggest you to look into that. It takes like transaction fees in order to basically back its reserve. But these are systems which are not so similar to Liquity, so I won't go into the details here. I just wanted to show that this is a system where you can basically create a stable coin by backing it by a crypto-based reserve. So now let's touch upon the third category, which I wanted to show, which is the one that Liquity fits into, which is the crypto debt-backed stablecoin. So here we have users, and the users, they are like borrowers. So what they do, so they are not just regular borrowers, they are margin borrowers. So what they basically do is that they can provide some volatile token, so this could be any token here as well, to the system to open like a loan or some account with the system. So you see here in blue, so every user just deposited and locked up some volatile tokens in the system. And now in return, they could borrow against this collateral, as we call it. They can now borrow stable coins. And now they borrow their stable coins, so they have some stable coins to spend in their accounts, but they also have here in red a debt with the system. And here, the important thing to note is that the value of your collateral has to be higher by some margin than your debt, because we need the collateral of the users in order to like cover the debt at any time. So that's a very important observation here. And now if you look at the total, the aggregate numbers, we see that ideally, or the aim of the system is that the total stablecoin supply that is generated, the only way to generate stablecoins is by issuing loans, by giving them out to borrowers. Now, this stablecoin supply should always equal the total debt in the system, like to just sum up all the debts of all borrowers and all the stablecoins in circulation, and this should be equal. And as I said, the collateral itself should be higher. So also in aggregate, the total collateral value should be higher than the debt. Now, if we zoom in, so that was the aggregate view. Now we can zoom in to the individual borrower itself, or himself. And we see here that we have the collateral. Let's say this is just Ether. In Liquity, we only have Ether as our collateral. And we have our debt, which is basically equals the stablecoin that's given out as a loan. So now we can set or define a minimum collateralization ratio, let's say at 110%, as we do in our system, which is the minimum you have to always maintain. So you can never drop, you are not allowed to open a position with less collateral than that. But it can happen over time that just your collateral, because it's volatile, it drops below this value. So it drops in value so that the collateralization ratio is now lower than 110%. So now this means that there will be a liquidation possible. So it has dropped below this line, which makes your position like this kind of loan vulnerable to liquidation. Now, just one thing here, maybe you know the terminology in other projects. This is called, like this position is called a collateralized debt position, or CDP, or in MakerDAO, which is our biggest competitor, it's called Vault, but we call it Trove. This is just a marketing expression, but this position is called a Trove. So don't get confused by that name. And now we see when your Trove needs to be liquidated, there will be some collateral surplus that you will lose. So basically, when there is a liquidation in our system, you will lose this portion. Like you will lose all your collateral, but also all your debt. So you will not need to repay it anymore because your position gets closed. But at the same time, you lose your collateral, which means that in net, you lose this dark violet range here. And now the aim of every like margin lending or stable coin system should be to make it as capital efficient as possible. So this here means that this minimum collateralization ratio should actually be as low as possible, because that's what the borrowers want. They don't want to lock up like twice or 3 times as much value in collateral as their debt. So this should be as low as possible, but at the same time, if it's too low, the system becomes insecure. So we need to strike a balance between capital efficiency and attractiveness for the borrower and security of the whole system. And the way we do that, and this is our main innovation, is by improving the liquidation mechanism. Like what's currently out there, we do it differently. And I can quickly just compare how we do it, or maybe just briefly tell how existing CDP platforms liquidate their positions. So what they usually do is an auction. So basically, they take the collateral that's left in the CDP and they sell it in an auction. Or another way is to sell it at a fixed price, and they determine the price by using an oracle. So they get the price of the Ether, which is their collateral, and then they would sell it off at a price which is slightly below the Ether price, or below the this oracle price, to make it more easily to make it sellable. So there is a discount or something. The problem with this approach is that auctions take time. They are not very efficient because they are only efficient if you have sufficient number of bidders, and sometimes there are just not enough bidders, because when there is a big crash on the market, maybe people don't even want to buy Ether or any other tokens used as collateral. So you have this problem here, and also with the fixed price sell-off, you still need to find a buyer and you need to give him a discount. Otherwise, it will be hard to find a buyer, probably. So the way we improve this is basically by making the liquidation instant. instead of waiting for the moment when we need to liquidate the position and then looking for somebody who could buy out or bail out our position, what we do is we have basically our existing stakeholders in the system that are there to liquidate our troves. So we already have the guarantors of our system available in order to liquidate the positions. I will tell you how that works in more detail later, but I just wanted to point out here that this makes it much faster. So here we don't need to find anybody because we already have the people basically to make liquidations possible. So there's no need to find a buyer, also no risk of further price drops, because an auction which takes, like, say, 6 hours is quite some time, and during 6 hours the price of Ether may drop by 10% or even more. So we don't have this extra risk of price drops during the auction period. So now a bit more detail how this works. So we liquidate whenever a position drops below 110% collateralization ratio. And we have basically a distinction in our system where we distinguish between a normal operation mode, the healthy mode, which is here in green, which is the case when total system collateralization ratio is above 150%. So this total means the aggregate. So like if you sum up all the collateral value and divide it by the sum of the debt, then you get this total collateralization ratio. So then the system itself is healthy. There is also an unhealthy mode below 150%, which would trigger something called a recovery mode. I won't go into the details here, but maybe if you have questions, I can also answer them later on the recovery mode. Let's just focus now on this part, which is the happy path of the system. And even here we have two steps or two systems or liquidation mechanisms that we can use to basically liquidate positions. And the first one is a stability pool mechanism, and the second one, which kicks in if the stability pool is insufficient, is a redistribution mechanism. And now I will show both of them how they work, because I think they are interesting. So let's see how the stability pool works. So this is our main line of defense, the main mechanism that should be triggered when a position falls below 110%. The way this works is basically by giving any holder of LUSD. So LUSD is the name of our stable coin, so it's pegged to the US dollar, obviously. So every LUSD holder at any time can put their tokens, any amount, to a stability pool. We see it here. So this stability pool can be filled up by LUSD tokens over time. And we also have another pool, which will collect Ether. So this is our collateral. But it will be empty at the beginning because we will see why. So now let's assume we have the positions in our system here, 9 positions. And this one, let's say, drops below 110% and needs to be liquidated. So what we can now do is relatively simple. We have the debt amount here, and we have more than the debt basically deposited to the stability pool. So what we can do is basically clear the debt and burn the same amount of LUSD tokens in the pool. What that means is we basically use LUSD tokens that are already in the pool to repay the debt of this borrower. So that's gone. We see that's now gone. And now what we also do is we just take the collateral, which is still in this trove, and send it to this other pool. So now you see this other pool just received some Ether. So it started empty, now it has some Ether. And the idea is that given the fact that we liquidate slightly below 110%, the value of the Ether that's sent to this pool should still be higher than what you lose here. So this pool may be lost 100, but this pool gained 109 in value. So there is a net gain in the end. So that's what makes it attractive for stability depositors to deposit LUSD tokens to the pool, because they can, at any point in time, they can also withdraw their deposits, so what's left from their deposit, but they would also withdraw a proportional amount of this gain. So everybody loses a proportion of his LUSD in the pool, but gains a proportion of the Ether, which should lead to a gain. Now there is this situation that maybe if a very big borrower, like a large trove needs to be liquidated, that there is not enough LUSD tokens in this pool. So that means we have more debt to liquidate than LUSD in the pool. So what we do then, we fall now back to the second mechanism I mentioned, which is the redistribution mechanism. So here we see what we do. So basically, we split up the position that needs to be liquidated in as many chunks or parts as there are fellow borrowers, active borrowers in the system, and we simply give them a share, a proportional share of the collateral held by this position. So by proportional, I mean in proportion to their own collateral, which is here marked in blue. So everybody now received a bit of collateral. You see it, how it goes up. And we do the same for the debt in red. So we also just give them like a proportional share, which also goes up. So now we have liquidated this position and everybody got more debt and more collateral. And again here, ideally, this should be a net gain for everybody because the value that you gain in collateral is higher than the debt that you receive. So that's our mechanism that was our mechanism to liquidate positions. And thanks to the fact that this all happens instantaneously, so there is no need to wait for somebody to buy or to bid or anything. This is more efficient. So we can, thanks to that, we can set the collateralization ratio below which the liquidations are triggered to 110%. So this value is still a bit under review because now Yulin, for example, is doing macroeconomic modeling. We are also collaborating with another company called Gauntlet, which is helping us to examine and to analyze whether the 110% threshold is sufficient or not. So it may be that we change it, but it seems at first glance that it should be sufficient. So now let me give you another overview of the price stability mechanism, which is the other big, I think, innovation of our system. And here I also want to compare it with existing platforms. So you may know MakerDAO, how it works. So it is also a stablecoin system, which is based on individual borrowers. And now what they do is they have a variable interest rate for the loans, like similar to a central bank. And they have some human governance mechanism where people can vote on interest rate cuts or interest rate increases. So by acting like a central bank, they can make the loans more or less attractive. And by doing so, they can regulate the money supply because the more attractive the loans get, so the more stable coins there will be on the market. So, and the larger the money supply, the lower should be the price. So you can basically adjust the loan interest rate and thus adjust the monetary supply. And also they have an interesting soft peg mechanism, which is just the fact that whenever your stable coin trades above $1, it makes sense for you as a borrower to take out a loan. Because as long as you believe that the value will eventually go down to $1, you know, or you hope that you can repay your position later or your debt at a lower valuation. So basically you need less money to repay your loan. So that's why people should have an incentive to take out more loans whenever the stablecoin is a bit above $1, and they have an opposite interest to repay whenever the stablecoin trades below $1. And also with the interest rates, we just see here when the interest rate goes down, loans should go up, so the monetary supply should go up, and the other way around. So this is, I think, relatively straightforward. But we do it differently. So we want to make the loans interest-free. So we take 0 interest from our borrowers, but we still have fees in our system. We have 2 kinds of fees, and they are both one-time fees. That means you pay them once and then you forget it. Like it's nothing that's recurrent, no fee that's just charged like on a recurrent basis. What we also have is a redemption mechanism, which I will cover later. I will show it how it works. That's not present in, I think, any other system or CDP platform. And what we are basically achieving with our mechanisms is that we in addition to the soft peg mechanism, which we also have, we create a hard peg. Like we create a price floor at around $1 and also a price ceiling at 110, which means that those are relatively hard price boundaries. So it's very, like it secures the price in a more direct way than just a soft peg mechanism. But let me go through the steps here. So we have seen that we can give out loans to borrowers. So that's what the main use case looks like. But we now also have a redemption use case. So the redemption use case means that any holder of Liquity, so this is LUSD, sorry, so I mean LUSD. So LUSD holders can redeem their tokens and get Ether at face value back from the system. So when Alice, for example, redeems 100 LUSD, she would get back $100 worth of Ether here. Now, the question is, where does the system take the Ether from to give to the borrower, to give to the redeemer? And this is a trick that we do. It may seem a bit unusual, but what we do is, now here we have Alice, who wants to redeem her LUSD, and we have Bob, who is a borrower, and Bob turns out to be the borrower with the riskiest position. By riskiest, I mean lowest collateralization ratio. We see here all the positions that are sorted by collateralization ratio, this one being the safest, maybe 350%, and this one maybe at 120%. Now, if Alice wants to redeem, the system, all it does, it takes her LUSD and repays loan's debt. And what it also does, it takes the equivalent amount from Bob's collateral here in blue and gives it to Alice. So now we see that Bob ends up with some residual or some surplus, but Alice would just, so Alice just gets like $1 worth of Ether for each LUSD, but Bob keeps the surplus. So it's not something that would lead to a loss for Bob, but it is something that may be a bit, let's say, not so like appreciated by a borrower, because the borrower may want to keep his position open for longer. Now somebody like repays it ahead of time. So it's a little bit unpleasant for him, but it's not a loss. And now it can happen that Alice needs even more. So maybe the amount that she redeems is higher than the debt of Bob. So then the system would just proceed with the next risky position and do the same there, and so on. So we just start with the position that's the riskiest and go all the way up as long or as far as we need to go to fully redeem her tokens. So now we have the two use cases, Bob the borrower, Alice the redeemer, and on both sides we take fees. For Bob, it's an issuance fee. It's just a percentage applied to the borrowed amount. So if he takes out 1,000, maybe he needs to pay 1% or just 10 LUSD as an issuance fee in LUSD. On the other hand, we have Alice who redeems, let's say, 500 LUSD and gets back, let's say, 1 Ether in return. So now she may have to pay, let's say, 0 or 1% of her Ether, that's 5 Ether, to this staking contract. So basically the fees, they are taken by the system and they are sent to a staking contract. And this staking contract holds another token, which is called LQTY, which is also a token created by Liquity, and which is there in order to capture the fee revenue generated by the system. And now the question is, how do we determine the fees? So how do we determine the percentage rates for the issuance fee and the redemption fee? Now, this is an ongoing research. I think Yulin is doing a great job and is helping a lot on how to determine those fees. So we haven't fully finalized the formulas yet, but the basic idea or the idea here is that we look at the redemption rate. We look at how many people redeem how much, basically which fraction of the total LUSD supply is redeemed. And based on that fraction, like any time there is something redeemed, we would increase the base rate. So we increase the base rate, which is the basis for both the redemption fee and the issuance fee. So here we see there is another redemption, which is even a larger one. And here this is an even larger one. And we also see that in periods with no redemption, the fee would just slowly decay. Like this is an exponential decay here. So the fee goes down to zero whenever we don't need to take a fee. But when there are redeemers, it means that most probably there are redeemers because the price of one LUSD is below $1. Because if it's above $1, nobody would redeem. It doesn't make sense. It only makes sense to redeem if it's slightly below $1 or even significantly below $1. And this is basically now what creates this price floor here. So we see that whenever our token trades below $1, minus the fees, I must say, so this also counts, there is an arbitrage strategy for any LUSD holder, because you can basically buy LUSD for a price less than $1, you can redeem it for Ether at the price of $1, and then immediately sell the Ether and make an arbitrage gain. And this cycle or arbitrage cycle leads to a reduction of the LUSD supply, and normally a reduction of the supply should push the price back, according to the quantitative theory of money. So that's what creates here a relatively hard price floor. And interestingly, we also have a price ceiling above 110, because we have this 110% collateralization ratio, which means that if we assume that the price is exactly 110 now, because there is an extreme upward pressure on our LUSD, so it's now trades at 110. So now what a borrower can do is basically just lock up some Ether and take out the maximum amount of loan that you can take out, like at exactly 110% collateralization ratio, and then just sell what you just borrowed. Like you sell the LUSD, you don't care what happens to your Ether later, because if the price is above 110 and you do that, you just take out the maximum amount and sell your LUSD immediately, you can make an immediate gain. So, and this means that if many borrowers do that, if large amounts are borrowed, then you can basically increase the monetary supply. So that's about it for how the system works, like the core principles. I'm not sure time-wise, maybe if I'm on track, so maybe it was half an hour. And just let me check the time. Ken, maybe I should speed up a little bit with the business model. So what I wanted to show here, we have basically 3 tokens in our system. The LQTY token, which captures the fee revenue, and we have the LUSD token, which is our stable token, and we have the Ether, which is used as a collateral for the loans. So this is the triangle basically, and now we can use this to create like a token economy, like this whole system should work as an ensemble. And here, I think what's interesting is how
Robert, sorry to interrupt. No need to hurry, we have enough time. And I think this is the interesting part. I see many students have questions regarding the business model of Liquity. So no need to hurry. Take your time.
Sure, I can also, I mean, we could also take questions now, but I can also finish the business model and take questions after.
Don't worry, you can finish your talk, and then we will nominate some students to ask questions. But
Perfect.
take your time.
Okay.
Right.
Sure. So let me continue with the business model then. Thanks, Yulin. So here we have, so what we do, I mean, is we need to somehow define LQTY supply. So because the LQTY tokens, they are not just defined by, or they are not like self-serviced as we have it with our LUSD token. Like the LUSD token is just given out as a loan. Whenever somebody comes along and wants to have a loan, the system would just mint LUSD tokens and burn it whenever somebody repays them. But here with the LQTY token, we cannot do that. We need to somehow define a supply. And we opted for a capped supply. So we say there will be an upper bound on the LQTY supply, and it will be 100 million tokens in existence that cannot be exceeded at any point in time. And we have basically 2 main buckets. We sell 66, or we have basically 2/3 of this supply available as a company to dispose of. So we can sell them to investors, and we did that already twice. We had a pre-seed round, and which was led by Tomahawk VC, and we also had a bigger seed round led by Polychain and also by follow-on investors. So that's how we could sell like LQTY tokens and get enough funds to create this system. And of course, we also can give them to team members and partners. So this is basically our like resource that we can sell to like be funded to raise funds. But on the other hand, and this is more interesting, we will have an automated issuance mechanism. You can also call it an airdrop, which basically incentivizes people like users and other stakeholders to take part, to participate in this whole economy. And we basically have two recipient groups. We have the stability depositors, like the people who deposit their tokens to the stability pool. They already get the liquidation gains, as we have seen before. So they get this difference between the 110 and the 100. But in addition to that, we want them to incentivize more. So that's why we give them an allocation, an airdrop of LQTY tokens. And what we also do is we have third parties acting as front-end operators. So you can think of a front-end as a web interface. It's just like a web address and application that's run by somebody, because we don't want to run our own front-end as a company. So we will decentralize this whole front-end. We will only create the protocol, the smart contract at the core of the system. And now to incentivize the front ends, they need to get some reward from the system. And we will see how this works on this slide. So basically, this is the protocol here. We see the positions, and we see that the protocol can give out LQTY tokens to the front ends, and it can also reward the stability depositors. So here, these people, they are all stability depositors. And the system would basically measure the turnover or the amount of stability deposits made through a specific front end. And based on the turnover, it would just proportionally define which fraction of the total, like which fraction of the 33% total airdrop should go to which front end. And similarly, the people using a front end would also get rewarded based on the proportional shares. Like if Alice here has like, let's say twice as much LUSD deposited to the stability pool, then she would get like twice as much liquidity than her friends here. And basically the split between what goes to the front end and what goes to the stability depositors, that's determined by something we call a kickback. So basically every front end can set a kickback rate between 0% and 100%, and then just whatever the rate is, let's say 80% goes as a kickback to the borrowers, and the remainder, the 20%, would remain with the front end. So here the aim is that we want to create like a competitive environment where front ends would compete through this kickback rate, but also hopefully by adding new features. So maybe front ends would not just want to run our protocol, but they would also want to integrate it with other systems like Uniswap, DEXs, or like whatever other systems, so they could offer extra benefits to the user. So that's the idea. And also the idea is that we would create a front-end launch kit. So we create this and would offer this for download. So the front ends, they don't need to code it themselves. They can just download it and install it and run it. And over time, the way this airdrop issuance works is that, I mean, we won't just airdrop like the 33% at the beginning. That wouldn't make too much sense, but we do it asymptotically. So at the beginning, in the first few months or weeks, we would airdrop a relatively large portion. And then the idea is that this would halve every year. So here the axes, they are not very meaningful, but every year the issuance should halve. So if we gave out 50% during the first year, we would give out 25% during the second year, then 12.5% during the third year, and so on. So this clearly incentivizes early adopters. So they have so that's what makes our system like attractive for people to become like early adopters. And last but not least, I think this kind of, if we put everything together, we see that we have the LQTY stakers. So people who own LQTY, they can stake it in the contract so that they would then earn redemption fees and the issuance fees from the system. And the system also airdrops a portion of LQTY, so not the ones that are just staked here, but LQTY that are generated through this airdrop, they would be given to the stability depositors in the front ends. And the fact that front ends and stability depositors get their share based on the turnover, they have an incentive to market our platform, to promote it to the end user, because the more users there are, the higher would be the fraction of this LQTY allocation that they get. And by like incentivizing growth and adoption, the fee revenue should go up as well. So there is a nice feedback loop by those stability depositors and front ends who would basically lead our system, like make it grow, and then by the growth would lead to additional fees, which make it more attractive to stake LQTY and so on. So this is like a feedback loop which should be positive for system growth. And yeah, that's it for the technical part. I think I'm done with the technical part. I'm also happy to just tell you a little bit of the story, like what the team, like how we work and how the project started, but maybe it makes sense to take questions now. So I'm not sure, Yulin, if we should take questions now or later.
Sure, let's take some questions. Right, let me find some questions here. All right, so a question from Chris Shump. He's not here today, so I will ask for him. So the question here is, what advantage is there to a decentralized algorithm over traditional systems? If the algorithm experiences a significant issue, can it be fixed or adjusted while in operation? I guess the question is about, since you are governance free, how do you tackle issues, when there's a significant problem or bugs?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I think there are pros and cons for making it algorithmic or making it governed by some human body. So we think that governance has still its problems. So governance decisions, they are often not really like based on a broad consensus, because not many people take part in the voting procedure. And there have been attempts, or it is relatively easy to like manipulate the results. So we think that by having an algorithm, we can bypass like the human manipulation threat mainly. But it's true that if we design the algorithm like in a bad way, we don't really have an easy fix for it. So what we can do, because we cannot just upgrade our system, but what we can still do is deploy a second version and make it relatively graceful to migrate, or relatively easy to migrate from the old system to the new one. So by giving like the users like this possibility, they could still migrate to the new system.
All right, I see, great. So I'm gonna nominate some students to ask some specific questions you posted in Sakai. So Le Huan Chong, could you ask your second question? Is
Hi,
Le Huan Chong here today?
Yulin, there is a question in the chat box.
All right, let me read this one. All right, this is from Riju. Can you ask him directly, Riju?
Okay. Hi, Robert. Thanks for your presentation. I have a question here. In this system, there are like mainly three currencies you have mentioned, and in which Ether is very volatile, but LQTY is very stable due to its pegging with US dollar. Like, what if US dollar's price become more volatile in N? For example, economic crisis, would this situation destroy the stability of LQTY and the effectiveness of Liquity protocol?
That's also a great question. Thank you. Maybe the name of our stablecoin is LUSD. So there is a confusion around that because we changed the name. So it's our fault. So LUSD is the token that's pegged to the US dollar. And you're right. I mean, pegged to the US dollar means that if the dollar itself is volatile, then LUSD will try to follow the value of USD. So I don't think that this by itself is a problem. I mean, as long as we assume that the dollar keeps its status as like the world currency, or as long as it's something that people are interested in as a peg for any system, I think then it's fine to keep it. So we would just like the system would just basically reflect the dollar's volatility through the LUSD token price. But I don't see like a risk or a threat to our system. Also, if you compare the volatility of Ether and the volatility of LUSD, of the dollar, it's still very unlikely that the dollar would be more volatile than Ether.
Okay, makes sense. So it's like a comparative concept, but not like absolute volatility, right?
Yes, that's true.
All right, so is Le Huancong here today? Okay, I will ask for him. So beyond the initial capital.
Huanchong is Le Huan is here. His name is Le Huan.
Okay. The second question. So the next student, please be prepared. The Gary Tree, your 1, 2, 3, the fourth question. All right. So first, Le Huan, please.
Sorry, my internet is unstable, so I think I'll cut off. Could you ask the question for me? Sorry.
Yes. So I saw you raised 5 questions. Could you ask Robert your second question?
I think he is saying like his internet is not stable, so it's better you
All right.
ask. Yeah.
Okay, I ask. So beyond the initial capital and fiat or crypto backing, are there any other barriers stopping competitors from creating functionally similar stablecoins? So this question is about how do you prevent people from just copying and pasting your idea on Ethereum or some other blockchain projects?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. I think that's something we have also been thinking about. So it is true that there are systems that are relatively simple to copy. We hope that by having this decentralized system of front ends, which will integrate our like web interface or just run it, that this would give us a protection because we can already build a community around the front ends, which should help us to have this like network of promoters. And I mean, it's not just all about creating a protocol. You also need to create a community around it. And I mean, we are also backed by a few bigger like investors like Polychain, which give us some credibility. So, but still, I agree that there is a risk. Like we have seen it with SushiSwap and Uniswap, because Uniswap has a very good reputation, but they were copied with quite some success. So yes, I think we are aware of this risk. You can never completely rule this out.
Yes, that's true. And that's also how blockchain projects evolve, right? Copy paste and then improve. So you have to be faster than others to improve yourself, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so next question from Gary Tree. Could you ask the fourth question that relates to China? And the next one, please be prepared, Nomuna. Okay, so go on, Gary.
Okay, yes, sir. So my question is actually about more about China's situation and about how cryptocurrency and the blockchain work. So Chinese government is increasingly stressing the importance of the blockchain technology and starting to make it kind of a national strategies. So, Dr. Robert, how do you think the blockchain technology would develop in China? And is there any like liquidity strategy towards China, towards China market?
That's interesting. I'm not sure I know too much about the Chinese market in particular, but I think we have a plan to grow in the future, like to create multiple stable coins, which would be pegged to perhaps also like renminbi or other currencies like euro. So we are very open to expand into other markets, but unfortunately, I don't know all the specificities of the Chinese market, but I think, as you said, they are more and more open and used to be more restrictive in the beginning, but I think now it's time to penetrate the Chinese market. And yeah, I think I would love, I mean, I think Yulin could be of great help with that as well. I think he knows it's quite some network and yeah, how to penetrate the Chinese market.
All right, cool.
Definitely, yeah. Thank
you. All right, hope I can have some. Next one, Telei, please be prepared. All right, so now it's Nomuna. The fifth question. Question 5.
Okay, my fifth question is that if you were to hire summer interns for Liquity, what qualities and skills would you look for from applicants?
Oh, good question. Thank you. I have to think. So we are currently growing, I think, like our community and business development team on one hand. So I think just there, one quality would be people who are very well versed with the whole crypto space. So they know about all the projects. So they are very up to date. So they follow like the space very closely, and they also know like the pros and cons of all the projects, and they can also anticipate maybe how the market develops, so that we are mostly developers, and sometimes we need kind of like an external input, like what we should do and how the market evolves. And I think that's something, if we were to hire interns, that could be a good skill set to have.
Right. All right, next one, Eric Liu, please be prepared. So for now, it's Telei. Could you ask your first and second question? I think they are the same, similar. Could you ask your first and second?
Okay, and I want to know that the LQT1 multi-gate rate is only 110%, is very low, and yes, very attractive. And I want to know how is the 110%, how could you calculate this rate? And second, how if there is a validity of the Ethereum, that means that we'll have a higher validity, and how could you keep the liquidity stable?
Yes, so thank you for the questions. I think maybe to your first point, like that 1 or 10%, so how can we keep it, or how we chose this number? So, I mean, our goal was to keep it as low as possible, but as high as needed, so that the system is still secure. So the number, I think it comes from an observation we did, or an analysis we did on our Oracle. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with price oracles. We are going to use most probably the Chainlink's Ether USD price oracle. And just by looking at their historic price data, we see that the worst case, like the highest price drop between 2 oracle updates, like the oracle is updated by Ethereum transactions, and like the biggest difference between 2 price updates is around 10%. Or it was, I think the worst case happened in March this year. So, I mean, just by looking at this number and by assuming that there will always be liquidators who will liquidate the positions as fast as they can because they can make gains, with 1 or 10%, it should be sufficient so that with a very high probability, the liquidations shouldn't lead to a loss for the stability depositors, but at least to a net zero or even a gain. So that's your first question. I'm not quite sure I fully understood your second question.
It means if there is the market is validated now, and if there is a drop of the what is the coin that the LQTY relied on?
So it's a collateral.
The ETH dropped 20%, and well, you will sell the LQTY if someone have 110% mortgage rate, and now there is a drop of the coin of 20%, and you will sell it immediately or will sell it in the next market day.
So maybe I can just go back. I think I got your point. So basically, we are here in the liquidation mechanism, and let's say there is enough token. So the stability pool is filled with plenty of LUSD. So now a position needs to be liquidated, let's say this one. And here, this is the happy case. So here we have some surplus, but it could theoretically be that the value in blue would be below the one in red. If like there is an extreme price drop where the Ether price drops by 20%, like within like a few seconds, basically, or minutes, then it would happen that what you lose here as a stability depositor, what gets burned, is higher than what you gain. So there will be a haircut in this situation. But overall, like the expected gain should be positive. So because maybe this happens once a year or every second year, but there will be many more liquidations that will lead to gain. So even if there can be theoretically situations where you have a haircut, it should be overcompensated by the gains in normal situations. But we don't need to find a buyer. You see it, we already have it available. Like it's not that we would need to now desperately look for somebody to buy or we don't need to sell our collateral because we can just take the LUSD from the pool in order to repay.
Oh, okay, I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so next one is Reju. So now, Eric, your third question.
Oh, okay. So my third question is, how did you choose to be self-employed rather than finding jobs in some giant companies? And what do you think are the pros and cons of being self-employed?
That's a great question. It's something that for me is like a chance of your lifetime, I would say. So already when I mean, as Yulin told in the beginning, I'm a lawyer. I had like jobs at like normal like courts, like state-owned also companies. But then it was already like a big step when I started to work for Dfinity, which is also like a bigger blockchain company. But then I realized that it was interesting. I did a research job there. I also had a lot of discussions with Yulin, which also led basically to this idea over time of just making a better stablecoin and lending system. And somehow I realized that it's just nice if you can build something, if you can realize your own vision or idea. And yeah, I mean, it was a bit risky. I mean, I think such a decision is something that you would not do just without weighing all the pros and cons, but I just thought I'm still young enough to take this risk. And so I just wanted to do my own thing, and then I left, and I think I didn't regret. So I was lucky that I could find some of my team members relatively quickly. And yeah, it's hard to tell. It's very different if you are founding a company and running it yourself. I mean, it's all about yourself. I mean, you're responsible for everything, which is nice, but it also can be a bit, it can be hard sometimes as well.
Thank you.
You're back.
All right, next one, Zenkar. So Ray, could you ask your last question?
Okay. So can I have two questions this time?
Sure, please.
Okay. So first, actually, I've been thinking about this question even before this presentation, because I have look upon some information about this Liquity protocol. I'm wondering, how do you profit from like designing this protocol? I also see a very interesting idea to do this, but like we already seen in this presentation, the main income comes from the issuance fee. And like I remember in the diagram, last diagram, maybe.
This one? Or this one?
Yeah, this one. And this, yeah. And except from the issuance fee, now I know there could be like extra additional issuance fee coming from like this circulation. But I'm still like confused, a little bit confused about, does this issuance fee bring sufficient income?
Yeah, that's a hard question. So we are also simulating that in our macroeconomic model. I mean, what I can tell, like just in general, is that we can only take an issuance fee or charge it if the system grows fast.
Yes.
Like the system is like relatively constant, we cannot charge it. It would be zero because it would just go down. Like with this mechanism, it would just be almost zero. I mean, what we also discussed with Yulin is that we should maybe have some minimum fee so that it wouldn't go down to exactly 0%, but maybe to 1%. So we would have like at least a minimum fee that we can charge even if the system is not growing too fast. But we hope that we have an initial impetus by this system, so people they want to get those LQTY tokens for free through the airdrop. And for doing so, they need to make stability deposits. And in order to make stability deposits, you need to have LUSD. And to have LUSD, you either need to buy them on the market or you need to borrow them yourself. So there is this feedback loop, which we hope that at least initially, there will be a big, relatively like fast growth. And this growth would then be compensated or would lead to protocol fee revenue, which is significant. But when the system is saturated, it can happen that it will not be able to generate too much revenue. I mean, we will see.
Okay, I see. And the other question, will Liquity create some new job opportunities in the future? Or rather, would this kind of protocol replace traditional commercial banks because of its advantage on lending loans? Because it's, you know, interest rate free and you can always redeem it to the US dollar.
So I would say that we are only competing with a relatively small fraction or area of what traditional banks or finance institutes are doing. So this would be a partial replacement or alternative to margin lending, because it's lending against margin. It's not lending against your personal credit, which we cannot do with this system. So I think, but speaking of margin lending, we have this vision, like within maybe a few years, there will be many tokens that represent real world assets or stocks or even like ETFs on chain. And once they are available and sufficiently used in practice, we can also use them as collateral. So at that, like starting from that point, we can basically like offer a similar service as banks are doing. So by giving people giving out margin loans against tokenized stocks, for example. So then it would make it interesting.
Okay, thank you for responding.
Sure.
Do you mind sharing these slides afterwards? I find it so interesting and want to like think more about it if you do not mind.
I'm happy to. Yes, we can share them.
Thank you.
No problem.
Robert, do you think there will be like a must for financial practitioners in a decade to understand blockchain, crypto economics?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I got your first.
Just wonder. Just thought about this. I suspect that quite some bankers will be let off because of this automatic smart contracts, this DeFi, right? Just thinking maybe in the future, the students in finance, economics, if they want to be financial practitioners, they need to know some knowledge about the crypto economics and blockchain.
I think that's a reasonable assumption. So I think as we grow, so the DeFi space has grown a lot. Like in this year, it went up 10x, I would say. I think as it becomes more important, it would also affect academia and also like what people would want to study. And for sure, I think this would be an interesting topic in addition to just the traditional finance.
Right. Okay. So we have Zenker for the last question, and Luyao, what is the schedule? What is the program? So how much time do we have after this?
We have 15 minutes. I think we can let Renke ask the question and let Robert finish the presentation.
All right. Okay. So Renke, you I see you have two very interesting questions. The last two. The fourth question is a bit technical, and the fifth one is business related. Could you ask these last two questions?
Yeah, of course. So hi, Robert. Thanks for your presentation. And my first question is, I think you just mentioned like there are three models when dealing with like the the first is the stability pool, the second is redistribution, and the third is recovery mode. Yeah, this one. So I was just wondering, like, how do you come up with this model? So it's just through like virtual experiment or just through like real practice?
So I think, thank you for the question. So this is really, I think, something which was the part that motivated me to come up with this project, because before even thinking about price peg mechanisms and stability, I was thinking of can we make liquidations more efficient. And I think even before coming up with the stability pool, I was just thinking of this redistribution. So this was the first part that I just had the idea that, I mean, if you already have people around in the system, why not use them? If you have your stakeholders around, the borrowers, why not use them to make the liquidations more efficient? But it was just by thinking, so we didn't do any experiments back then. So it was just by reading a lot about MakerDAO, by seeing how it could fail. Like at that time, it didn't even fail. So I mean, it was just that some people had some criticism about the auction, the mechanism, and how that might become a problem if the price drops very fast. And we saw it then in March this year. So it was just based on that I came up with this idea. And then later, I think I had like this other idea that we needed stability pool to make it a bit less, how should I say that, to make it less unusual for the borrower. So normally they should not be affected by this. And the recovery mode is, I think, not even my invention. It was co-developed with Rick Pardo, which is my co-founder and now lead developer. So this was in discussion with him that we came up with the recovery mode.
All right, a comment before Linker asks the second question. So the stability pool, back at the time, so when I visited Definity Foundation in Silicon Valley, I remember there was a slogan, if an idea doesn't sound crazy to you at the first, then it is not innovative enough. So when Robert first explained to me the stability pool, I was like, this is such a crazy idea. And then over time, I found it so brilliant. I'm glad that you came up with this idea and then you implement it. I think it's a great idea. And then this relates to the second question Zinker is going to ask. Please.
Yeah, it's related to my second question. So yeah, it's more like personal. It's like what motivated you to build this company? And you know, like right now, they're already like in the market. They're already like what they call maker. Yeah, they have already some companies that is the like they have an advantage on the market already. So like, why do you want to build Liquity, and how do you think this company would develop in the future?
Thank you. So the main motivation was starting from the borrower's perspective. So I mean, I found the idea of stablecoins interesting as well, but I just focused like on how can we build a platform or a protocol that makes borrowing as attractive as possible. Like how can we push the boundaries of making it technically just as attractive as we can. And that was like, I think the main thing that motivated me. So push the boundaries, see how we can lower the collateralization ratio, like this threshold of 110%, and just offer something to borrowers that's not around on the market. So, I mean, with Maker, you can take out a loan at 150% collateralization ratio, and you may have to pay an interest rate, which is variable, which can go up to 20%. That happened like 1.5 years ago. And I just wanted to offer something which is more predictable for the borrower, so that you have kind of like an interest-free position. And yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it is a bit, I mean, I see that there are big competitors in the market and they have a huge first mover advantage. And I just hope that with this front-end incentivization mechanism, we can like a bit outsource our marketing effort so that promotion will also be done by those parties, and so that we can get into that market. But it won't be easy, so I assume.
Right. Thanks, Robert. Okay, so we still have some minutes for, let's say, 1 or 2 questions. Feel free to ask questions now, because there are so many questions from students, and due to time constraint, I have to pick some. But if you have some question you really want to ask, please, this is the time. All right. I mean, otherwise, Robert, you still have some slides you want to present?
I just have one slide. It's
Sure.
a non-technical, or this one. Maybe we have to skip the virtual office hour. I mean, I would have just shown this video, but I think we won't have time for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, we still have like 12 minutes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe. So I can
As
tell
you
you,
prefer.
let's see how far we get. So I just wanted to tell you like a brief story. I already mentioned my motivation, how I started this project. So in November last year, I left Dfinity to fully focus on this idea. And basically, I just looked for a Solidity developer, like Solidity is the language for Ethereum. And I started with doing my own prototype, but I'm not really an expert in programming. I can do prototypes, but not much more than that. And I needed somebody to help me with that. So I just by searching on the internet, I found Rick's, like Rick goes by the name Rick, who had a blog on security issues and how to build secure smart contracts on Ethereum. And that's how I found him, because he also had like a post, or he was available basically to get hired for work. And that's how I partnered up with him. He became my co-founder relatively soon, early this year, and he's now our lead engineer, with now leading a team of basically 4 people of developers. And later this year, so I I was like from the beginning, I think I have to make this big shout out, like Tomahawk is a VC that basically supported us from the start, because the founder of Tomahawk VC is a good friend of mine, and he's also a co-founder of Dfinity. And he basically supported this project from the start. So this made it also possible to start this without having like to worry about too much about how to finance this. So at least in the first few months, I could have this extra support. And also through Tomahawk in February this year, I found Danny, who is now our front-end developer, and he has a lot of experience with software development in general. He's not working on the contracts, but working on what you see on the outside. And then in March, the story goes that we needed somebody to help with marketing, with promotion. I mean, you not only need developers, you also need people who do the business development. And I found that Ashley, who used to work for Maker as I think their first business development person, who was then an advisor to Uniswap already, and that she gave a talk at the ECC conference in Paris. And I just wrote to her that I would also attend this conference, and maybe she would have time to meet, because I wanted to sell her this project. And that's how, like over a beer, basically, I convinced her to partner with us, and she's now helping as an advisor for business development things. She also helped a lot with fundraising later, because she's very well connected. So that's how the team grew to 4. And then once we had our bigger seed round in summer, like in August, we got some more funds, so we could grow our core team of 4 people back then to basically we could hire Bingen, who used to work as a core developer for the Aragon project. He is now working closely with aside Rick on the core backend. And we also had Rich, who is looking into cross-chain and in future versions, like how we could potentially port this to other platforms, also to Dfinity at some point. And also in the meantime, we hired Boyan, who helps us with operations, just administrative stuff, because I realized me as a person, I had a lot of administrative tasks to do, like just paying invoices, doing keeping track of all the numbers and all the correspondence and stuff. So he's helping a lot with that. And he's also doing quite some good research in blockchain in general. And last but not least, we found Yulin. I mean, we already knew each other. In September, you started doing macroeconomic modeling, and you created a really comprehensive and great big model which encompasses the whole system now within 1.5 months. And thanks also to the help of students. I'm not sure if they are here on this call, who are helping in the background with coding up some parts of the model. So that's really great. So a shout out to all of them, and also Yulin. So it's really great. And I think we still need some time to calibrate the model and to change some parts of it to make it a bit more realistic. But I'm excited to see the results, and we can look how the fee formulas that we came up with, how they fare in practice, whether we need to change them or not. So I think this is now a good basis for experimenting there. Maybe Yulin, you would like to add something to that?
Sure. Yeah, I can briefly talk about this. So I did my PhD in monetary theory, so it's a great fit, because in the past I did economics modeling mostly for countries, for central banks, and Liquity is more like a small economy on the blockchain. It has its own monetary policy. It's very challenging in the sense that it's rule-based, in the sense that it's not it's set in advance, right? So it's more difficult, more challenging than monetary policy in reality in most countries. These central bankers, they could set monetary policy at discretion whenever there's a shock, like in COVID-19, they could lower interest rate, and then boost the economy. But with Liquity, it's not possible. You have to set all the interest rate, all the monetary policy rules beforehand. So that's a challenging part, but also very interesting. And it's a great pleasure to work with Robert as always. I felt pretty sad that Robert left DKU last year. So I left DKU to follow him.
It's
All right.
likewise. Always a pleasure to work with you.
Just on the comments, the students who helped you will do a presentation about his perspective of Liquity on Thursday in the class. And afterwards, all the students in the class will make presentation slides about their understandings of Liquity, how it's related to macroeconomic concept, and their understanding of your business model, and what are the rules they found if they could improve upon your model to start their own business. So we will send those presentations to you afterwards, and we will post all of those on the project website.
Oh, that's really exciting. So I'm looking forward to all the inputs, and maybe you find like some big improvement and we can work together on that. So yes, that's really exciting.
Right, so Robert, if you look for some interns someday, you know, we have a lot of talented students here.
That's great to know. I think we eventually need more talent for sure.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, like, all the DKU students needs to finish their signature work, which is something like a PhD thesis, while during their undergraduate, so it's quite challenging. And for the signature work, they must have some experiential learnings, for example, like an internship. So that's something that they take for credit. So this is something like our university really encourage. So it's like not your commercial or paid internship, but it's something like companies can offer ideas and the experience for the students, and the students take it for credits as a learning process to finish their dissertation thesis. So something like that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So maybe we'll find other avenues to collaborate if students are interested in doing some research or other areas for Liquity. So yeah, I mean, let's keep in touch. I'm happy to follow up on that.
Thanks, Robert, so much for the wonderful presentation tonight, and thanks for the students for the questions and Yulin for the coordination. Yeah, so I will post the videos shortly afterwards, and I'm looking forward to see all the students' inputs on Thursday.
Thank you so much, Professor Luyo, and thank you so much for your attention. This was a great session and the questions were great, and I think we should keep this up and see what comes out of it. So I'm really excited.
Cool. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.